Guten Tag, bonjour, good afternoon. My name is Thomas Beschorner. I'm from the Center of German-European Studies at Montreal University in Quebec, Canada. And I've been invited by the website germanstudies.ca to comment on the financial crisis. I will do so not as an expert of financial markets, but as an economic ethicist. Economic ethics is interested in normative aspects in the economy. And here we can distinguish two approaches. One is rather descriptive, the other one is rather ethical. Descriptive means that we are interested in social and normative categories that are part of the economy and that are important for the functioning of the economic systems. So, a normative category in this sense would be confidence, would be trust, would be worldviews, and so forth. From my perspective, the current financial crisis also questions our economic theory in the sense that the normative categories mentioned earlier are not really part in the mainstream economic thinking. And there's an interesting paper, an interesting analysis by three authors, Peter Bone, Simon Johnson, and James Quark, entitled The Baseline Scenario. And the authors undertake here an interesting analysis where it is argued that the financial crisis is not really a monetary crisis, but a crisis in confidence. And I will quote some facts out of this paper, which gives you an idea why they come to such a conclusion. America's housing stock at its peak was estimated to be worth 23 trillion. 25% decline in the value of housing could generate between 60 and 180 billion reduction in total consumption, a relatively modest amount compared to the US GDP of 15 trillion US dollars. The authors conclude we should have seen a serious impact on consumption, but not of the current scale. So, in other words, the financial crisis is not a crisis in terms of money, in terms of hardcore economics. It's a crisis of confidence, a category that is not really included in economic thinking. And I also I would like to argue that this really questions our economic theory and that we need some major changes in economic theory. My first point. My second point refers to a rather normative ethical approach in economic ethics. And so what is ethics? Let's start with that. Ethics deals with questions of fairness, of justice, of responsibility, and so forth. We are interested here in a general interest, not in an interest of a particular group. So why can we say the financial crisis is also an ethical question or concerns ethical questions? The answer is pretty obvious. The actions of certain actors, here the mismanagement of banks and insufficient political regulations in the US, lead to negative consequences, not just for these actors, but also for others. People have lost their savings, some have already lost their jobs, and some more will unfortunately follow. And last not least, our taxes are now spent to save the banks. What the financial crisis clearly demonstrates is the important impact of businesses in our societies today. Businesses are privately owned, but they have an enormous impact in the public sphere. And in this sense, they are, or we can call them, quasi-public organizations. As such, as quasi-public organizations, the business of business is not merely business anymore, to use a phrase used by Milton Friedman. They have increasingly responsibilities beyond profit maximization. From an ethical point of view, they have to be seen as corporate citizens with rights, but also with responsibilities. With respect to the financial crisis, one important aspect of the analysis is that with respect to the financial crisis, one important aspect of the analysis is that the management of the banks have undertaken highly risky businesses. Why did they? The salary of the employees of banks in such ways of speculations are just to a very low percentage a fixed salary. The much more higher part are boni for successful contracts. Thus, the internal incentive mechanisms lead to these highly risky businesses. My Swiss colleague Ulrich Thielemann from St. Gallen University talks about greed or lust in this respect, in this context. I agree with his analysis, but I would not suggest using this term because it sounds like an ontological basis, as if all managers are per se greedy. Instead, I suggest analyzing the institutional setting within firms, the incentive mechanisms, the business culture as a starting point of concrete measures to avoid certain bad practices we are all paying for now. And one step further, and very important, not just to avoid bad practices, but also establishing good business practices. In this sense, economics is like soccer. You need a good team that performs well, not just for one season, but that can also play next year in the Champions League. You need a business culture that enables creativity and innovations in your team. These little tricks performed by Zidane, Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. You need an organization that supports young talents. And, last not least, you need rules of the game that apply to all teams, Thus, inter-organizational, one may say, political rules or regulations are still necessary and even more important today. So, let's stop betting on the question who receives the first yellow card in a soccer game. Let's focus on the game again. Thank you and Merry Christmas.